Every few months, the world rediscovers the word peace. A ceasefire is announced, a handshake is staged, a headline sighs in relief. And for a moment, we're all meant to pretend that coexistence is possible. But coexistence without equality isn't peace, it's PR, it's a photo op, it's what happens when we mistake silence for justice. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined on Out Loud by two women who refuse to perform peace and instead maybe expose its price. Amber Fares, the Lebanese-Canadian filmmaker behind Speed Sisters, whose latest documentary, Coexistence My Ass, did premiere earlier at Sundance. And Noam Shuster Eliassi. I hope I got that right.
Yep,
Is that correct? Okay,
perfect.
Good enough. The comedian, the activist, and as some have called her, the enemy of the state. Her story and stand-up form the backbone of the film that we're going to discuss, Coexistence My Ass, which follows Noam over 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, from Harvard's Projects for Peace Fellowship to quarantine to the heartbreak and reckoning that followed October 7th. We're going to talk about a lot of things: language, trauma, and the danger of being funny in a fascist moment. And most importantly, why the path to coexistence begins not with both sides, but with moral courage. I want to thank you both for joining me.
Wow, what an amazing opening.
Amazing.
Thank you.
I mean, it's not that amazing, but I appreciate the support. We all need each other in moments like this.
I don't know. We have not been introduced like that before.
And I appropriate it like a good,
You feel culturally appropriated in a good way. We are flipping the script today. So I guess the intro just speaks to how it makes me feel to talk to people like you, the respite of comedy and a little bit of joy and laughter in moments like these that we're living through. On a serious note, how are you doing? How are you feeling these days?
It's interesting that you started with laughter and joy, because it's only one of the things that I've been struggling with. How do you keep joy and how do you keep being funny when I'm, for example, surrounded by comedians who I used to perform with or agreed to go on shows with or thought that I could challenge around me, and they turned out to be entertainers of army bases, of a genocide machine. And I think, I see how much people are so eager for laughter and satire and punchlines, especially during, like you said, during fascism and during these times. But there's also a person behind it, and personally, it's been really, really, really tough to perform this role.
I can imagine. Amber, I'm so thrilled that we can all three have a conversation. It's the first time on this podcast I'd speak to two people, but I wanted you to be here because we met a long time ago with your first film. As we were just talking about, I want to start by asking you, how do you feel in this moment? And why was it important for you to make this film?
Oh, I don't know. How do I feel in this moment? I mean, I don't even know if I can describe it, right? Like I'm here in the US and obviously have been making a film for the last 5 years about what is happening in the Middle East and with Noam, and watching the rise of the right in Israel. Not that the right hasn't always been there in Israel, but we've gotten even further right. And then watching what's happening here, I think, like everyone, it's like you go on with your daily life, and then all of a sudden you get these like reminders of what's happening in Gaza and what's happening here and what's happening there, and I just feel off balance like all the time. Like,
that's such a good way to describe it. I think we all feel off balance. I was marching yesterday 20 kilometers here in Perugia to Assisi. It was a peace march, and during it, there were many moments where I felt physically unbalanced, not just mentally unbalanced, perhaps, or emotionally unbalanced. It often helps me, not for guilt or shame, but just empathizing with the people who have no choice but to march and march away from and towards something that is disappearing. With that in mind, I just want to start with the basics, for people who, maybe they're living under a rock, maybe they don't know you. Your show and now this film both carry the same title, which alone I think is brilliant. Coexistence My Ass. It reminds me of my grandmother, Teta Mofida, because something she would say, but she'd say kiss my ass or lick my ass. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But you grew up in, if I'm not mistaken, Neve Shalom. Is that what it's
Yeah.
called?
Yeah.
So it's like an oasis of peace, quote unquote, one of the only villages where Jews and Palestinians live together by choice, as it's described. Yeah, so I kind of want
the
to
only
just,
one by choice.
yeah,
Yeah.
the only one by choice. So how did growing up in this place that is, I guess, in a way, built on coexistence, how does it shape your beliefs or even your disillusionment in coexistence?
Yeah. First of all, one of the first things I say when people ask me about the village, because I want to shoot myself because I've been asked about it since the age of 7. Like,
I know, I'm so sorry to ask you
no,
about it as
but
the
it's
first.
such a big part. But whenever I type Neve Shalom in English on my iPhone, it autocorrects it to Never Shalom. And so, I sometimes just want to. I
That's
grew up in
funny.
Never Shalom in the end. I think that when I proposed this title for my one woman show to Harvard and I wrote Coexistence My Ass and I literally just sent it, it really started as a joke because what I wanted to do is to unravel and to unpack what my experience has been, which is witnessing again and again the same rhetoric of this attempt to bring people together with ignoring, the elephant in the room. And today it's multiple elephants in the room. And I think that the disillusionment started, and I owe this credit to my parents. My parents, when they moved to this village, they didn't really intend that we live in coexistence and happily ever after. And, I grew up with Palestinians and period, and they get like applause. I grew up in a very political household. The first memory I have of my father is actually him in Israeli prison for refusing to serve in the first Intifada. It was, every time he would come back home, he would be asked to be drafted again. He would refuse again, and it was a group of him. And back then, it was hundreds of them. He was part of a movement, and while other Israeli fathers around me were considered heroes for going and wearing the uniform, in my own household, my father was considered a hero for refusing to go to the occupied territories and to be part of the illegal occupation. My parents really opened up to this point of view, also because Amber has become a part of the family. When she picked up the camera and when she came to film us, my parents already saw her as a part of the family. My mother was born in Iran, so I have this mix in my identity. My dad is Ashkenazi, son of Holocaust survivors, and my mom is this strong Iranian Jewish woman. Her environment did not raise her politically at all. She acquired all her political awareness together with my father since they've been together in high school. And, they're the first people who chose an alternative for me and my brother. They basically said no to the Israeli mainstream brainwashing.
Or to the system. Yeah, to
Yeah.
the system.
And so for them, coming to live in this community was, I think, them wanting to practice a real alternative. And when I saw other families moving here, or because this is like a hub of the peace, then you see the differences between people who are coming to this as decoration and between people who are coming to do political work.
I'm so grateful that you brought up your parents for several reasons. I've been familiar with your work for many years. I feel like I also know you through Al Jazeera, covering you, through friends who are journalists and just mutual friends who sing your praises. And I want to ask you, I mean, you've said before your parents, if I'm not mistaken, refused to barbecue on, what is it? Israel, hold on.
Independence Day.
Yeah, I wrote
That
this
day.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it might not seem major for people, but refusing to barbecue, your parents refusing to barbecue on Israeli Independence Day, out of respect for the Nakba, presumably. I mean, that small act of solidarity can be profound, especially if multiplied. But if I may, it also exposes a contradiction, right? I mean, can you really grow up believing in equality when one people's celebration is another's catastrophe?
Yeah.
That is the question. And what is my role in this when I'm associated with the people who have, done this wrong, and I am being expected to do the barbecuing, but I'm going to see my best friend's village where her grandfather had to run away from, and her entire family fell apart and, went to different places, and they lost their land. And there are so many personal choices that are political. And
Mm-hmm.
if it's army service, if it's the way you mention your, national holidays, the languages you speak. And because the peace movement in Israel is such a failure when you look on the macro level,
Mm-hmm.
then those personal choices were kind of like the last resort for someone like me who grew up with Palestinian mothers, essentially. Like, I was educated by Palestinian teachers, mothers, neighbors. And so ignoring that, or when wearing uniform after that, is looked like betrayal for me.
And when you talk about the personal being political, obviously everything is political, and I hate politics because it's filthy and it's manipulative and even perverse. But Amber, I mean, just your choice to make this film, a lot of the choices you make about the stories you choose to tell, as someone who's admired your work for ages, I mean, as a Lebanese filmmaker who spent years in Palestine, what did you see in Noam's life that made you think this story isn't just about one woman, it's about the actual myth of Israel itself?
Yeah, like I mean, I think with my films, with Noam, it was a way into talking about what is happening in Israel, Palestine without it, being overtly political, right? Like I knew Noam. Noam and I met years ago when I was living in Ramallah making Speed Sisters, and we have
Mhm.
been friends for many years. And when she came to the States to go to Harvard, that's where we reconnected again. And the idea of doing a pod or a film came from that. And it was really, I knew Noam, I knew her politics, I knew her story.
Mhm.
And so I knew it was just an interesting way to talk about this issue. But obviously I did not know where this was going to go, right? Like I didn't know at the time. I thought the film was going to remain in the States and it was going to be about Noam
Interesting.
becoming a
Mm,
comedian in the
mm.
US. So originally I thought the film was going to be about Noam performing on university campuses during the 2020 elections, is really what I thought the film could possibly be. We had no idea, that COVID would come along. Noam would have to go back home. I wouldn't be able to get there for years to come. And so I had to, find somebody in Tel Aviv that would be able to sort of
Take on.
partner with me
Hmm.
and take this on. And I had met Rachel Leah Jones, who is an amazing documentary filmmaker based in Tel Aviv, and her partner Philippe Belish is a cinematographer, and they like took on the project wholeheartedly. And so, the film took on a whole different life than what we ever imagined it
Well, I
to
mean,
be.
and that's the beauty of film, maybe, right? Like life interrupts it, and you have to adjust, especially documentaries.
I mean, I mean, I used to, yeah. I mean, you plan and you think it's going to be one
Yeah,
thing, and then you have to be
yeah.
open to like where it's going to take you. And that was in this case, there was no way that we knew that we were going to be, filming 5 years leading up to like one of the biggest sort of events in our lifetime.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm. I
and we just were able to roll with it, I guess.
Yeah, speaking of roll with it, roll with my ADHD, because as you were speaking, I had a thought. Like, I just want to pepper you with this question, each of you, very quickly.
Yeah.
When you hear Western diplomats use words as they do so often, like coexistence, reconciliation, normalization, do you hear peace, propaganda? I mean, what do you hear? What does it conjure in you? I'm curious, Noam. Do you have a visceral reaction?
It's their way of avoiding accountability. It's their
That's succinct. That is succinct.
it's a way of saying basically Palestinians have no national ambitions, have no, Palestinians don't deserve the full scope of what Israelis or people in the West deserve. And therefore we're just going to stage something very nice. Can't you be like the
Yeah.
cute, like Dubai, peace, peace, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Jewish
yeah, yeah.
life,
They
and
want to
come here,
compare us
the
to.
and so And so when I hear that, immediately I see like erasure of history, of identity, refusal to acknowledge the how Israel was founded, like what was done here to Palestinians and continues to be done.
Amber, how about you? I mean, you hear that response from Noam. What comes to your mind when you hear it? I'm sure in the
Look
States
at,
it comes up all the time.
I mean, I'm also
Yeah.
Canadian. Like, so like
Oh,
it doesn't, yeah. So that, I mean, it really hits with me as well. And that was one of the reasons why I was interested in making this film about Noam, because while I am, my grandparents came from Lebanon, I was born and raised in Canada,
mm,
and did not know about, you know, the First Nations history in my own country. And it actually took me to go to Palestine and then come back to Canada to sort of
mm.
reframe what was happening in Canada. So there's been years, like, I mean, you want to see erasure of culture and of identity and all of these things, you don't have to look further than the country that I was born in. And
True. Or
so,
even in the States. I mean, it's a common
or in the
tale.
US is definitely. So yeah, so when it's very similar. When you hear those words, you know that they feel
Mm,
empty.
Empty is another way that it's like people always accuse me, oh, you don't want a ceasefire. You don't want this peace plan of Trump. Like, Israelis and even, people from the Palestinian Authority are putting words in my mouth saying I'm against peace and the ceasefire. No, I just don't believe that this ceasefire is about actually ceasing fire. Fire is not just bombs. Fire is occupation. Fire is apartheid. Fire is, you know what I mean? So I want to kind of bring it back to a conversation I had a few weeks ago with Tamer Nafar, the rapper who I really admire and who told me something that really stuck with me. He said, if you want coexistence, let me exist. In the anthem of Israel, in the flag, in the language, let his trauma exist. To me, that was so powerful. And I want to kind of bring it to you both because the film, for me, also plays like therapy in a way,
You
the good kind, the kind that I might want to go back for as opposed to the other kind. Noam, there's this incredible moment where you talk about trauma and the absurdity of having to kind of convince the world that this happened, that a traumatic event happened. What does it feel like for you to kind of exist in a place where trauma is denied, as Tamid was referring to, where you go to the global therapist and they say, no, you haven't actually been through anything real, or at least that's how I imagine it.
Wow.
Is that true? I don't want to put words in your mouth. At a time when there's so much pain and so much loss for so many people, and I'm sure you can include yourself in that, right?
I think that I never know what comes before, and I've always been like a little bit of a political animal, and I've always loved the stage, and I was always, I was always the one to take the mic and to say the things and not hold back on my opinions. And
I've
I think
noticed.
I think growing up with Palestinians and feeling this, I feel this miserable feeling of I am not unique. There is nothing extraordinary about me. All that happened is that I was dragged from the brainwashed narrative and was shown a very simple thing, a very simple thing. And, in the earlier years when I was still young and very energetic, I was like activism, and I was in the UN. I was in charge of this like amazing initiative, and I was working under the radar with extremists because I thought we can de-radicalize this and that. The UN,
Yeah.
shut down the program. I was fired, and comedy gave me the opportunity. Also, I started comedy when Zelensky was elected. I was like a Jewish comedian.
This is perfect.
Perfect. That's how I'm going to influence the world. And what comedy gave me is kind of no limits. I can use all my languages, and I can use all my identities, and I can uncensor myself, and I can reach way more people with this
It's
creative
true.
tool. But I have to say that in the past 2 years, this kind of limitless
Mm.
feeling that I've always felt with comedy and making fun of normalization of with Israel, with like the Gulf countries, and all these jokes that spoke to millions of people. And seeing where we are today, and again watching comedians around me, and watching comedy become this tool for propaganda and this tool for entertaining war again. And I see comedians making genocide jokes on stage, and I'm like, oh wow, I wait a second, there is more here. This is scary. This is scary. This is like almost betrayal of this tool that is supposed to
Well,
challenge.
I guess the truth is a tool can be used for good or bad,
Yeah.
right? Whether comedy, whether social media, whatever it might be, weapon, the pen. And with that in mind, I mean, wow, I should always do three people. It's so easy to seamlessly transition between the two. Amber, as a filmmaker, how do you and how did you in this film balance documenting sort of Noam's personal pain or story with the collective trauma that her story represents? I mean, how do you capture something as sort of invisible as the collective denial that sort of seems to dominate Israeli society?
I mean, I don't know if I thought about separating the two necessarily. I think that in telling Noam and Noam telling her story, like that stuff comes through in a very natural way, and that you don't have to. And I think that's like one of the beauties of storytelling and of film, is that you make those decisions of how you're bringing those elements in. And we chose to tell the story through Noam, and so stayed very true to how she experiences life, both in terms of her family history, but as well as how she shows up in the world. And in doing that, these elements kind of come through.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because there's this scene where you're performing Noam for a Palestinian crowd, and I think you said, like, "Don't worry, I'm only here for 7 minutes, not 70 years." And I'm wondering, what are you really doing in that moment? Can you break it down? Like, is this about? Yeah, what is that? I mean, how do you measure sort of the cost of being funny in a place that tends to punish honesty and a lot of other
Yeah.
elements?
Well, first of all, this show that you're referring to is in the heart of Sheikh Jarrah, like Palestine Comedy Festival that happened there. It is like it was like a code for like resilience, and so like the neighborhood and Palestinians in the neighborhood are going through so much. So I didn't want anyone in the audience to think for even 1 second that a Jewish Israeli performer that was allowed in this space does not acknowledge immediately, where she stands. And also, the comedian that is introducing me, Amir, he's like, tonight, one of our Jewish...
Was it Amir Zahed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, I have a surprise for you. Before I went on stage, Amir goes, no, if you are funny, no problem. But if you are not funny, it's not my problem. And so I felt this big tension of being really, really funny. And also, this is Amir's joke. So I made a joke about stealing his joke.
Yeah. That's funny.
It's about making the power dynamics present immediately. Yes, a Jewish performer is standing in front of you, but she knows.
She's aware.
She's aware.
Yeah.
And
I mean, go on.
I just want to say that recently I've hardly been performing here at home. It's been really impossible for someone with my views. And so when I was in the US and Amber was...
Because people there don't want to hear anything you say, right?
And it's like, when people are programmed to, there's only so much that you can be critical of. You can be critical of Netanyahu and the government. But once I start speaking of the hardcore things that I really believe in related to Palestinians and to Gaza, it's like... And I was in the US with Amber when the film started touring, and we did all these stages, and Amber would film me even though the film is finished. But, the audience, for example, in Brooklyn is very heavily critical of what Israel is doing in Gaza. And a comedian is now introducing an Israeli comedian. So I go on stage and I say, hey, everyone, just to get this out of the way, I'm an Israeli comedian. So if I bomb a lot tonight, your taxes are paying for it. So,
God.
this is this is the magic of the connection that I love so much about comedy, is like you make the truth present in a moment, where in the UN or in other jobs that
Yeah, you can't. You have to.
you wear
Yeah,
a
ugh, it's
suit and
just
you
a waste. You're just on that hamster wheel.
yeah,
Let's not even open that can of
yeah,
worms. No, I appreciate. That's a really good answer to, because I guess Amber, like, okay, I'm not a comedian, but just hearing Noam and watching the film and meeting other comedians, I totally agree that comedy, and that's why I'm trying to work on a show that is about real things, but is somewhat satirical, which is tough to do, especially in a moment of such
yeah.
sort of gravity and seriousness. I'm not, doesn't, you know, does I don't have a lot of experience doing it. I like the challenge. And I'm wondering, like, is there something you learned, Amber, about the limits of comedy, even, or the limits of courage, when you're a woman, sort of, you know, standing up in a way to a state that calls itself democratic repeatedly, the only democracy in the region, while actively silencing dissent? I mean, I'd imagine part of the reason why you aren't performing there isn't just that your jokes would be dead on arrival, for lack of a better phrase, but that people don't want to hear from someone, or they don't want to take someone seriously, even in a comedic sense. Noam, when you have the kind of views and you want to talk about the kind of things that you do. So yeah, Amber, is there something you learned sort of about the limits of
Um,
comedy?
yeah, like, I mean, I felt like over these last 2 years, there was a lot of times that, like, that it wasn't funny. Like, comedy just wasn't the right tone to be using, and we talked about that a lot in terms of,
Mhm.
what we're putting out in social media when, and how the film yeah, I think
The
that,
context, yeah.
the context really means a lot, and it felt, there were so many times where it was just like we're at a loss for word, like they're just we were at a loss for words, and jokes weren't just going to, like, weren't going to help. And so I think, I think storytelling is really important. I think that, we're trying to make mass, like with these films, like a cultural shift, which is, happening in the United States. And I think it's, in Noam's case, it's more than just the comedy. It's like her whole being is sort of political. And the amazing thing about doing a film about Noam is there's so many facets of her life and
Mhm.
of herself that, that that
Layers you
that
can
come
just
into
keep,
it. That it's the
yeah.
layers that you can, yeah.
No, and
And
that's
that,
what,
and I think it's really great because the film does go from high to low. Like,
and
you're laughing one second and then you're crying the next, and you're sort of, that's how I think people are just experiencing, like, life right now.
honestly, Amber, I could relate to that so much, and I think so many people who watch it can. I mean, I also want to kind of ask about, not October 7th per se, but the final chapter of the film. It's like you see Noam sort of, and forgive me if Noam, if I'm mischaracterizing your life experience, but on the edge of sort of new love, and then overnight everything kind of just falls apart. October 7th
Mhm.
happens, you know, all these Israelis are killed. We see then tens of thousands more Palestinians slaughtered, obviously the genocide. I mean, I guess my question is, you shared a little bit at the top of what it was like to live through that, but maybe you can share with us. I think people who listen to my show would love to hear about, like, what's it like watching friends, even so-called progressives. You talked a bit about other comedians sort of suddenly abandon their empathy for Palestinians. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I have a lot of friends who describe that process, or witnessing that process. Is that something you can relate to?
Well, first I want to say to, what Amber just said, that a lot of times it wasn't funny, that the decision to open up to a film crew, and especially a female, like behind this film there is like this, I like to call them like a powerhouse of women who,
That's always a winning recipe,
it
if you
is
ask me. But go on,
so
go on.
so important that women make films, and in this case also women made a film about a woman, and I don't think there are any other women in the world who could have, told this story better. And I don't feel like it's my story anymore, because what we're saying in this film, it's bigger than my story, and I see the way audiences react to it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And every single filmmaker Amber, our personal, connection and relationship. Amber was in the process of editing this film when Israel was bombing Lebanon and the village of her family. And Rabab Haj Yahya, who is the Palestinian editor of this film,
Mhm.
was editing this film while Israel was mass murdering Palestinians and, bombing endlessly Palestinians, and basically we're watching a genocide unfold. And Rachel Leah Jones as well. Like, we were here together watching just everything, collapse around us. And these women made this film while watching their own societies, their own people, like just everything in horrors. And so I felt really, really safe along the way all the time. And I knew in my core when I said yes to being documented that, this is a collaborative process and they will tell the
Mm.
story in the best way because we are also politically aligned. And sometimes it was really draining to be documented when you are not your funny self, when you are going through really hard times, things,
No, I can imagine.
it's really, really hard. And this was, one of these moments. I mean, being a comedian that has spoken about the context her whole, I mean, it's always the elephant in the room, the occupation, how the status quo is not sustainable. And then, on October 7th, unfortunately, I lost, and people that I know and friends of mine lost their families, and it was obviously, devastating and
Yeah.
really, really difficult also to see the way the right wing in Israel was weaponizing their death. um, Look, these Israelis who were pro-Palestinian, who were in the West Bank protecting Palestinian shepherds, even they, like, Hamas killed them, so taking our identity as people who were on the Palestinian side and suddenly highlighting these leftist activists and saying, even they, as if we are together in this thing, and even they, it was really,
Interesting.
really hard to communicate all these contradictions and
Uh-huh.
all of this, knowing exactly. I mean, we knew from the first moments how Israel is going to react. I mean,
Uh,
people ask me, when did you know it's a genocide? I knew it's the intention has been genocide because I speak Hebrew, and on the same
yeah.
day I heard ministers and army people, the way they're speaking. I mean, you didn't need to have a international human rights degree to.
Degree.
This would be the response.
I'm gonna jump in because when you were talking about choosing sides or not choosing sides, but the Palestinian side, right? It's like that you kind of acknowledge and accept and engage with, let alone, reflect that in your work. I have issues with sort of this side, that side. I think the binary, I mean, I think we all agree on this. I'm not challenging what you said by any means, but
Did
I
I
do
say
want
I'm
to ask
choosing
about.
side? Did I say I'm choosing side?
No, 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 you didn't.
Oh,
I'm putting words in your mouth.
oh
Oh my
no.
God, I'm being horrible. You
Like,
said
remind
something
me for
about,
the.
no, no, you said something about the Palestinian side. You said, seeing these people who show or, they
Oh,
were
oh,
attacked.
oh.
Yeah, and all that came to my mind is when you said the words the Palestinian side. Obviously, when we talk about these things, people often refer to the two sides, right? The Israeli side and the Palestinian side, two competing narratives. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, Amber, like, do you feel? I mean, obviously, Noam rightfully said and shared with us some of the context where you were editing on this film, working on this film while your family's villages are being bombed, Lebanon's being bombed. Um, do you feel like you've been forced to pick a side? Because, even now, as the world celebrates the ceasefire, oftentimes it's celebrated as if it's a miracle or as if it is actually a ceasefire, when in fact, my friend Karim in London, Loki, the artist, another artist who challenges the status quo very defiantly. Israel, as we know, routinely bombs Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, so many countries, even Iran, during or after ceasefires. Do you feel that this is a ceasefire?
I mean, I think speaking to the sides element of it, I think that was one of the things about choosing Noam as a subject for a documentary was that Noam doesn't choose sides.
Okay.
Noam embodies a different path forward from what, my experience of her, right? Is because she is in and out, like those cultures, those languages, like
Mm-hmm.
she's standing up for everyone, which is what we're all doing. Like when you're saying, are you on a Palestinian side or an Israeli side?
Mm-hmm.
Like really what we're fighting for is human rights and equal rights. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're not asking for anything more than that. It's for recognizing everybody's humanity on all sides and all in all.
Mm.
And so for me, that, that isn't, I know that the path forward for all of us and for all of us that care about that region is that we have to work, we have to work with Israelis and Lebanese and Palestinians. Like we all have to come together to fight
Mm.
this.
Mm.
And yeah, and for me that was, that's what Noam embodies, and that's part of the reason why I chose her
Yeah.
as a subject. In terms of the ceasefire, I don't think any of us are under the delusion that this is actually a ceasefire. Like, I mean, if this like, they would have had this months ago, years ago. It's not like
Well, I
any
mean,
of
if
this
I'm not
negotiation
mistaken,
has really changed.
forgive me for bringing up the sides thing. I hope it didn't derail us. What I'm trying to get at maybe is my familiarity with your work, even before this film, was that you were an anomaly in some ways, and that not only are you an anomaly, but your existence, your story, inherently challenges the narratives that exist on both sides in many ways. And I guess what I want to know is maybe coexistence isn't the goal now. Sometimes my grandma used to say to me, Ahmed, you always try to do things out of order. You're so impatient. Like, why are you always like trying to get ahead, And I guess I'm wondering, like, if peace begins, and this is something I thought of when you were speaking at the beginning of this conversation, Noam, if peace begins with truth, what truths are we refusing to tell or to acknowledge? And I don't mean you, I just mean the
Yeah.
collective we, right? Like, even in comedy, and I'd love for you to share your thoughts on this, like how do we rebuild maybe language and empathy? We're living at a time when Elon Musk, who's as powerful as he is, says, oh, empathy is weakness. When words like Palestine or occupation not only are not encouraged to be used or allowed to be used by the New York Times, as we saw with the leak of that style guide in April of last year, but Palestine or occupation gets you labeled anti-Semitic in the UK, in a lot of Western Europe, like legally even in some cases, right? What would you say to the next generation of comedians, of artists, people who are inspired by you? I'm sure there are some in Israel and many, many more beyond, but are terrified of the consequences of being silenced, of being blacklisted.
Well, I think you said something really important, which is the anomality. And on every interview and in front of every audience, it is very important that people hear me out and remember that I belong to like a teeny tiny minority.
Why is that?
And
Why is that? Is it because the brainwashing
because
is really,
Ahmed, the
really well
Zionist
done?
dream is that we are, the Israeli melting pot, where I forget my family's history in Iran and the fact that right now the biggest Jewish community in the Middle East outside of Israel is in Iran, and they're living there, and I have communication with people there, and they are okay. And if we open up a conversation about what the Zionist movement and what the establishment of the state of Israel did to the history of Jews in this region, and basically destroyed and robbed us from our languages, from our history, from our real connection to this area, without this like colonial occupation, rap that
So in a way, sorry to interrupt. In a way, it sounds like you're saying for Israel to exist in the way that Zionists want it to exist, they had to erase the actual Jewish history, which may have also been erased by other Arab and other
it's
governments, but
it's erasure and also then a twist. So you erase something and then you also twist it so that suddenly, you know, the farhod or historical events where Jews were, I mean, there was a complicated history, right, in Arab Muslim countries. For it wasn't all pink and lovely, right? There were incidents, but the attempt in recent years to turn it into, you know, this catastrophic life where Jews in Europe were being haunted and were being prosecuted, and Jews in Muslim and Arab countries were being, no, it's not true. It's a twisted reality.
Blaming. Yeah, I hear you.
And I know what my grandmother from Iran I know what she's been through when she came here. She was sprayed with DDT because the Ashkenazi establishment saw them, the Jews who came from Ethiopia, you know, the darker and darker Jews, or my family from Iran, or families from Yemen, or families from Iraq, they saw them as inferior, but they needed to bring the Jews here because of demography and other, you know, national ambitions, and they were treated like shit. They were my mother grew up in poverty, in a development town, and the fact that she came out of there with all this political knowledge and she makes the connection between how the Zionist movement treated non-European Jews and how the Zionist movement treated Palestinians, and make these connections, and that's her point of reference when struggling with Palestinians for liberation. That is a miracle. It's it's a miracle, because the entire system is designed that I will go to the army, that I will use my Arabic for intelligence purposes, not to make fun, you know, of the status quo in Israel Palestine.
I asked you, I guess, why you think you're an anomaly, why it's less than 1%. The lack of willingness to even just take a moment. You know, someone on Twitter the other day, someone was trying to attack, I think it was Mahdi Hassan, saying that, oh, Mahdi, this, that. And, you know, whatever people think about Mahdi, Mahdi was only simply saying that, you know, he was pointing out that even the Nazis or in other genocides, that there was sort of a willingness eventually, an ability to sort of reckon with at least a part of what was done. And he was, I think, expressing sort of the disbelief a lot of critical thinkers, including Gabor Mate, who joined me on this podcast.
Yeah.
If you look, you know, for him to describe Israelis as Nazis, as a Holocaust survivor, for him to voluntarily do that, I think it reflects a real sort of inability to fully comprehend how radicalized this society is in Israel, how brainwashed they are, how limited they are in terms of seeing Palestinians as anything other than a threat. And, you know, I guess I want to clarify, like, could you boil it down a bit more as to, like, A, is it still as small as it was before in terms of your anomaly status? And B, where is there hope that you see of that changing?
Yeah.
Is there hope through the comedy, through your networks, through people? Do you hope, even without evidence, that Israelis will sort of wake up to the reality that you poke fun at?
I think that, you know, hope, like the word coexistence that you asked before, is kind of like, who doesn't like hope? Who doesn't like coexistence? If it's like a side effect of really, really hard work that you're going to do, I'll take it. Like, hope is not like a choice for me, or this it's the struggle, it's the constant demonstration of what the alternative is. And so I really remember on October 8th just watching masses of young people on scooters just going towards the I know now I know that it was towards, you know, the deployment, like to go, you know, there is a mission, we need to defend. Nobody's asking questions. Nobody's asking, why did Netanyahu fund Hamas and called it a strategic asset? How is this government that is in charge of and responsible for October 7th under their watch, why do you think they are sending you to a mission that will defend who? What are you going to do? Nobody is asking questions. And this has to do with many elements. First and foremost, it's our Holocaust education that has failed. Never again is empty. It's empty words. We did not learn anything from the past. We've let it repeat, and I hear it in everyday conversations of people around me. How can you say there are no innocent people in Gaza? How can you deny that there is, purpose on purpose starvation when we?
How can they? How can they? It's really the brainwashing of the
I will
media
quote.
and
There are much bigger experts than me who have
no, but
taken.
I'm curious as
Yeah,
a
no,
young
I will.
person who, yeah.
A few weeks ago, I moderated the first Hebrew public discussion of the genocide report of Physicians for Human Rights, and it was happening way too late. One of the panelists that I interviewed is a historian who is based in Poland. His name is Daniel Baltman. He's based in Poland. He has done excessive research on the methodology of genocide and how nations come about to commit genocides. And he's an expert on the Holocaust. And he admitted to the audience, I only confronted myself this past January and allowed myself to call it a genocide. And the facts were not the thing that prevented me from calling it a genocide until now. It was my own disbelief that we, the people who have been through this, are able to be the perpetrators of those same crimes. And so when you grow up in a conscience and a national narrative that teaches you that you are the victim and everything,
No matter what.
no matter what, and
Yeah.
everything that you are doing is justified, because if you don't do it, what will happen is
The trauma, bringing up the, okay.
and
Wow. Go on.
I mean, there is
No,
more
this
to
is
say. There is
really
much more.
powerful. Yeah. We
There
could
is,
spend 2 hours, but
and
yeah.
there are more elements. It's also, one really big element of it is the glorification of the military and the militarized society, and the way that it penetrates really to every part of society. I mean, in high school, the army, in the intelligence, they knew my level of Arabic because I studied in high school outside of the village. We don't have a high school in the community. And we have intelligence officers coming into classrooms, calling me outside, doing like these verbal exams. And when I said no to refuse to the army, it was also, they got to know of my resources, of my Palestinian dialect, of my ability to and I had to look at these officers and to tell them, the Palestinian mothers who taught me this amazing Arabic, I am never ever going to use this Arabic to spy on them or anyone. For you, I will not give you, not my body, not my soul, not my languages, nothing. And these are the examples. But you asked me about hope and what I see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, maybe, maybe not hope, but
yeah.
what do you think needs to happen, or is it even possible for more people to sort of see Palestinians as anything else? The first step is to see them as anything else other than these dehumanized, numbers that are a threat to their safety.
Now when the ceasefire is coming to effect, I mean, I speak to people, for example, from Breaking the Silence. The first testimonies that they received from soldiers were as early as October 9th, when they knocked on the door of Breaking the Silence and they said, this time it's different. I mean, we know that there are illegal crimes that have been done in Gaza and the West Bank, but now we have just been ordered to shoot at civilian targets everywhere, and this is going to get even out of control. And now that there is a ceasefire, and hopefully journalists will come in, and there will be, and we will be able to fully also see the scale from outside and inside. I know that there are numbers of gray refusal numbers of soldiers that we haven't seen in past years. And I can tell you that as someone who has already refused the service, and I know what the process is like, I have been approached by as much people as I've been approached since I refused 20 years ago. And so I'm ongoing Zoom conversations and training conversations with young people where I basically tell them what they're up against and how they can refuse, not just me, also an organization, for
Yeah.
example, called New
Yeah.
Well that is doing it. And so I'm not saying that like, oh, there is a huge movement of refusal. No. But what I'm saying is that we have to continue pressing on the fact that these powerful actions is where we have to really press against, to tell young people, you don't have to give your body and soul to these war criminals. You don't have to blindly serve. And so I feel like
Yes.
I have this this role to play, and I'm not saying that tomorrow it's going to be like this mass movement, but it
No, I know.
started.
You got to start
Mass
somewhere.
movements never start with mass movements. They
Yeah, of course. No, respect
I
that. Go
I
ahead,
wonder
Amber.
though with that, and there's like a boycott movement that is really growing, right? Both the cultural boycott and the sports boycott, which I mean we all know that what that did for South Africa, and it feels like that is really happening, like starting right now as well. And I'm curious how Israelis are internalizing that, like they are being isolated on a global sense.
Well,
like what is sort of the dialogue?
No, that's
internally
a
around
great
that?
question, because what I wonder, and just if I can quickly piggyback, Noam, is like even the term boycott, like there's some Israelis who are like, they're woke, they get it, they understand, they're aware. But then you mentioned boycott, and it's like it triggers this sort of like, whatever it might be that is conjuring this idea that no, like it's against us, and why would you, and I just wonder, like, what do you think of what Amber
I would
asked?
divide it to roughly 3 groups. The first one, the ones that you mentioned, they're very, very small, where like I welcome these boycotts, because I think the fact that we are living a normal life while we're all collectively responsible and complicit for a genocide is insane. And then there is this group that is a little bit, they want to believe that they're liberal and that they're leftist, but they're like, okay, oh my God, this is like really, really bad. But I protest against Netanyahu. Like, how can you boycott me? Like, I'm the good, I'm pro-democracy. But they're not willing to reckon with the elephant in the room, which is that we have been complicit and responsible in genocide for the past 2 years. And then there is this group that these boycotts and this is just pushing them to a corner, and they're saying it's all anti-Semitism, and it's just making them, tune into Bibi and be like, okay, yeah, we'll be a pharaoh state, to say, like a pariah
Prior
state.
state.
And and we're Jews, we're hated all over. This is anti-Semitism. I won't go to Athens.
Yeah, don't go to Athens.
Yeah.
No, but I've heard that as well, and I poke fun at it because I think if the real reckoning came, Israelis would be really surprised to see just how many people are just viscerally disgusted by not only the actions, but the way in which ordinary people have been coerced into defending and justifying the actions and boasting. I mean, I think the belligerence, I always tell people when they're like, Ahmed, you're doing an amazing job, bringing awareness. And I'm not being humble when I say, maybe I'm doing something, and Amber's doing something and you're doing something. But I think it's the Israeli military, the Israeli society, and the Israeli government that has done more for the Palestinian cause for liberation in the last 2 years than anyone else, even if unintentionally, just by the sheer brutality, the sheer belligerence, the soldiers with the thousands of videos they filmed of themselves in Gaza. I mean, people want to make fun of certain people for making jokes like, about, what was that guy, the black guy who I can't even stand, not JD Vance, Van Jones, making a joke on whatever show, speaking of comedians, not that he's a comedian, but he's pretty funny.
He made fun of himself,
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is like, the Israelis for me have done more, and they don't realize it because of how disconnected they are, not only from the reality in Gaza, but also from the world. I mean, okay, you can travel to Bali and Greece and all these things to escape or to do what we all do. I escape. But eventually, I don't know how, I don't know. I mean, you can buy TikTok, you can buy Disney, you can, buy parts of ChatGPT and send them hundreds of millions of dollars to try to change the history. But people saw what they saw, people feel what they feel, and I don't know how the youth is gonna. So I hope the reckoning comes. Sorry, I don't know why I'm pontificating.
No,
but in the spirit of time, I want to just give Amber a moment before we close. Amber, I asked Noam what she would say to the next generation of artists who want to challenge, as you do so well with your work, not just this film, but I haven't forgotten the first film I saw of yours, and I know there have been others people might not be familiar with. Of course, I'll link to all your work, but what would you say to people who want to do this, who want to challenge the status quo, but are afraid?
I mean, I don't know. We're living in such a different world than when I started this film, and I'm going to be really honest. Like I'm, living in the US. I'm here on a work permit. I'm not a US citizen. And, I'm Arab, I'm Muslim, and I'm speaking out about Palestine. And I feel like I'm quite nervous about it. It's a very precarious situation.
Well, I don't know how you navigate that. I have been blessed in that I'm not in the States during this time in this new world, because I don't know how I would be able to navigate that and the sensitivities that come with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And it's something that, that I'm definitely aware of, and and I think for artists, I think that it's important that we continue to tell these stories and we continue to use our art in, to confront and to battle sort of the fascism that's taking over the world right now, but, particularly United States and Israel. But at the same time, we have to, you have to protect yourself as well to a certain degree. And so it's trying to find where your boundaries are, it's sort of do what you can with what you have. Right.
Now you're sounding like my therapist, know where my boundaries are. You don't know your limits.
Yeah, I know. But it's something to really take into consideration, right? We're dealing with something right now that we've never, especially in North America, have never experienced, watching these ICE agents, it is mind blowing. And I think that there's always for me in the back of my mind, I think that it is important. I don't think that we should self-censor by any means, but there is a lot of consideration.
There's reality.
And about how we do it. And this, and in some ways, this film is wrapped around comedy. It is, it's not an overtly political film in that it's, by its title and whatnot, but it's, but we're trying to shift culture and yeah, I don't know. I don't even think you should air that now.
No, don't worry. I will. I just asked it to give you a chance to speak because me and Noam have been going back and forth.
That's fine. No, also I'm this is just really for Noam.
No, I
know. I don't really if you cut me out, I'm absolutely fine.
No, we're not going to cut you out. But I do want to say, just to end it, I just want to thank you both for taking the time to join me. I also want to thank you for helping create this story, this film, because for me, for what it's worth, what Coexistence My Ass reminds me of is the pain, the beauty of the reality that peace isn't, a press release that Trump can put out. It's a long, long process. We've learned that from history. It's about truth telling first, and being willing to tell the truth to yourself first before sharing it with others, and that justice is not revenge. It's not a political film, as you said, Amber, but it is, sadly, we're living in a time when everything is so inherently political, when genocide is being committed and being defended, and when the people who speak out against it are being themselves attacked and erased by the legal system, by the media. And so for me, the path to coexistence begins when we stop pretending and we start listening. And that's why I'm so thrilled to have you both with me. That's why I really admire the work you do, especially I can only imagine how challenging it is. Thank you for refusing to lie, even when it would be easier. Or maybe you are lying and I just don't know.
I really feel like I'm doing the bare minimum. It's really such it really feels like the bare minimum. And there is something that is really important for me to say in every interview that is connected to this film, that what we're saying in this film, and I know Amber agrees with me, Palestinians have been saying for decades, and yet I meet audiences.
We have.
Yeah, and yet I meet audiences where it's easier for them to hear it from an Israeli Jew. And then I tell the audiences, if this is the case for you, then see it as a warning sign and see it as homework, because you have to do better.
That's an amazing place to end on, because and to do better, you can watch Coexistence My Ass, which is out now in the world. You should see it, you should argue about it, share it, let it haunt you, let it make you laugh. Ladies, I want to thank you again. Really appreciate it.